Morning, everybody. Welcome.
Good
It's a
morning.
pleasure. Good morning. It's a pleasure to have you
Good
all. I hope
morning.
everybody's doing good on this Wednesday, June. And I know a lot of us are probably kind of like at the tail end or just finished school. So congratulations to another year. Um, Very proud of us all for making it, for kind of, getting through and, going through all these changes that a school year, provides for us, especially in this day and age where we're seeing so many changes with the platforms we use. So happy to have you all. Happy to be having this conversation. We have two great speakers with us today. We'll be kind of joining this discussion panel. And just while we wait for people to join in, feel free to, in the chat, mention where you're calling in from, what your school is, and just like a quick snippet of what you hope to get out of this panel. I know a lot of us are always kind of in the process of writing these policies, thinking about where these policies sit in relation to what's being released and what's out there. So we'd love to hear from you all about your thoughts and your intentions with joining us today. And whether that's coming off mute or throwing it in the chat, feel free to engage in either way. In case you don't know either, there's also a hand raise function, one of your buttons you have at the bottom of the screen. If you ever have a question, feel free to use that and can call you in on that.
Hey there, I've sent several messages, but it says that they're not being delivered. Anyway, I'm in Santiago, Chile.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, it's nice to meet you. Hope the weather down there it's a really nice day here in New York. Hope it's nice there as well.
It's cold. We're in the middle of winter here.
Right, yes, I know. I had a friend in Australia and I would always be like, oh, it's summer here. It's beautiful. And they'd be like, it's unfortunately 50 degrees. But regardless, I hope you're having a beautiful day. So I have a couple people joining us. I'm gonna let them in. And I think once it hits 10:05, we'll get started. And as people kind of trickle in, they can just kind of join into the swing of things. And as we go through this, as we kind of hear from our guest speakers and their schools, AI policies and what they've decided on, at the end, we'll be sharing resources similar to those and some of those actual resources if you're interested in exploring those. As you imagine where your school's AI policy may be headed and what you might like to add on to it as we kind of look at this next school year. All right, let's get started. So without much further ado, this is AI Policy 2.0 panel. So this is going to focus on having a discussion around some questions I generated to help us think about like what is in our AI policies and what may need to be added to our AI policies as Google, Anthropic, Copilot, Microsoft, as these platforms continue adding features that maybe work for us as educators or maybe work against us for the kind of pedagogy we're trying to lead in our classrooms. And so just a quick reminder, recording is going to be available later. It'll be on our webinars page. I'll share a link to that at the end. Please feel free to ask questions throughout. We value your voice and opinion. So while these discussion questions will be poised to our panelists, in the chat, feel free to chime in on the conversation. Or if we open the floor to a question, feel free to chime in as well, again, in the chat or off mic, and then share what you've been doing too. So it's very valuable for other schools to hear where your policies are being led and the decisions you're making. So we hope this space kind of opens up the floor for that. And then for our agenda, we're actually going to open with a video that demonstrates how some students at International School of Paris have been engaging with AI on their tech team. Very cute video. Happy to share that with you all. And then we'll jump right into the panel discussion. We have 7 main questions and a couple other questions that if we have time to, we'll get to. And then at the end, we'll end with a Q&A session. So we'll open the floor if there's any questions, again, to our panelists or to myself about things coming up with AI policies and things coming up with new features for the platforms we use. And so just to give this a little bit of background, Ling Lin, the academic technology integrator at the International School of Paris, shared with us this video of their middle school tech team's animation video that demonstrates how this tech team, the tech team students have been engaging with AI policies. So in this, they talk about, their thoughts on the policies and how they've been engaging with it. So play it, and just really quick in the chat, if you don't hear the if you don't hear the audio video, just let me know and just troubleshoot that quick. But hopefully this works on first try.
Learning for complexity. You should use AI for brainstorming, summarizing, and organizing ideas.
Don't use AI to generate assignments without meaningful personal input. Embracing diversity. Use AI to personalize learning and support diverse needs.
Don't use AI for unethical purposes like harassment or spreading misinformation. Inquiry, innovation, and learning. Critically evaluate AI outputs for accuracy, bias, and relevance.
Don't present AI-generated work as original without explaining AI's role. Learning to be well. Use AI to manage workloads while maintaining ownership of your learning.
Don't depend excessively on AI in ways that diminish personal development. Global citizenship. Consider AI's ethical, cultural, and environmental consequences.
Don't ignore the societal or environmental impact of AI tools. Language learning.
Use AI to enhance.
You can use AI for learning support and grammar checking to enhance your communication.
You should not over-rely on AI, such as for translation, to compromise language learning. experiential and service learning. Use AI to support problem solving in service projects.
Don't delegate experiential learning entirely to AI. Personal engagement matters.
We should all be responsible digital citizens, using AI to enhance our learning while maintaining our own thinking and integrity.
So I really like that video. It's the animation's very sweet to see students like working so hard to, translate their own thoughts in either kind of abstract or very kind of representational ways. But my main takeaway, and to this introduction in a moment, my main takeaway is that students are very conscious of the boundaries that AI presents them with around ownership of learning and just good stewardship of their communities. I would also love to hear your thoughts, what resonated with you with that video, and as we design these policies, hearing directly from students their own thoughts, what should we be incorporating as we create these things. So feel free to share in the chat. But without much further ado, I'm going to introduce our two panelists with us today. So on top, we have Kelly Enright. She's the Director of Technology at Vail Mountain School. You can find her on LinkedIn there. And she will be sharing with us some of what Vail Mountain School has been doing around their AI policies, along with thoughts on, with these new features coming out, how are we going to be adapting to them? And then we also have Micah Malloy, the Assistant Principal for Instruction and Innovation at Brophy College Preparatory, who as well will be sharing with us what Brophy has done. They have an extensive AI literacy and guidelines information on their website. And again, at the end, we'll be sharing these resources. So Kelly, if you could just introduce yourself first, I'm going to hand off the mic to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. As Teddy shared, I am the Director of Technology at Vail Mountain School. We have been excited to explore AI as a tool and I've definitely been experiencing the pros and the pitfalls, and so excited to talk about that this morning.
Thanks so much, Kelly. And Micah, hand off the virtual mic to you.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Yeah, again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're at. It's about 7:15 a.m. in Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm at, and it's going to be 108 degrees today. So if you are in the midst of winter, maybe send some of your cool air this way. We at Brophy, we have been really leaning into AI since the start. And not just because we thought it was the newest, flashiest thing, but because we felt like we had a responsibility to make sure that we were walking with our students and our teachers in the right way for something that we did and still believe is going to be one of the most transformational things to happen to education in a very, very long time. So for us, it's not just a, hey, this is the shiny new thing, but it's more of this is rooted in our mission and what we're trying to do with teaching and learning. And we have a really heavy responsibility to try to make sure that we're doing that the right way.
Thanks so much, Micah. Yeah, and second all those things. I think it's all about doing this for the responsibility of it. And yeah, super excited to get into these questions. These are some of Vail Mountain School's AI policies. Just kind of briefly showing us, I think a lot of people are familiar with the stoplight system, where certain actions with AI are deemed kind of like permissible, while others are cautioned against. And then at Brophy, a plethora of resources on, some of these frontier labs, AI guidelines, as well as their own thoughts around, how should we be, leading forward and leading into this new technology. So we'll get into the panel. So the first question is, most AI policies were written assuming a student makes a deliberate choice to open an AI tool. Now AI is on by default inside the documents students already write in, such as Google Docs. Does the student may use AI with permission model still describe the role they're in? And if not, what's going to replace it? And Micah and Kelly, we can kind of do whoever wants to go first. Take the floor.
I can jump in. So our history teacher came to me this past school year, very concerned that JSTOR now has AI within the database. And as you may or may not know, JSTOR is, scholarly articles that we use to really get at the skill of processing difficult text, citing sources, things like that. And so we had to talk with students a lot about what is the skill we're trying to teach here. Because if the skill we're trying to teach is to be able to decipher the information that they're reading, what does the tool do to enhance, and what does the tool do that takes away from learning that skill? I think in many ways, AI with permission would still work, but it requires more of a conversation, and it requires a little bit more nuance as we think about which tools students are going to and why.
Thanks, Kelly. And yeah, I agree. I think it's like, when we're trying to teach close reading, it's a little bit difficult to know if, some of those thoughts are coming in from students, or, the summary is kind of injecting, into the thought process around, how they decipher a text. Yeah, thank you. And Micah, would pass the mic to you if you have any thoughts.
Yep. So, I mean, this is good. This is a good question just to give context for our policy and how we're coming about this. In 2022, I think our initial approach was not that we're not going to block AI, we're not going to ban it, no draconian, no AI policies, but until we figure this out, you have to have your teacher's permission, I think was the default. And we realized really pretty quickly that one, that wasn't really possible to enforce at all. It just wasn't realistic. And two, it was actually our students who pointed out that the model was not equitable. And I was having a conversation with our student AI committee, and if you don't have one of those, that's one big takeaway that I would give everybody is get a group of kids together and talk to them about AI. It'll be amazing, I promise. But early on, I was talking to them about our policies and said, hey, I think we need to come up with something more definitive than this. What do you guys have? And a student said, well, what if we flip the paradigm? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, right now our policy is you can only use AI if your teacher tells you to. But what if our policy was you can always use AI unless your teacher tells you not to? And everybody paused in the room and looked at me like, oh man, is he going to light him up for saying this? Like, what's going to happen here? And I said, go on, tell me more. And then the energy in the room was electric as these kids started running with this idea of what could happen if we flip the paradigm. And they pointed out, some really good case studies that a student could Google something or look up something on YouTube or find a Khan Academy video or find a random teacher on YouTube explaining a concept, and they can learn that on their own if they don't understand it. But and that's great, and we would celebrate that student and say that you were resourceful, nice job finding out the answer to this. But if the same student asked AI to explain the complicated concept in a different way, all of a sudden that was, without the teacher knowing, that was taboo and potentially academically dishonest. Or if the video that we watched mentioned using AI to help correct grammar, and if a student had a tutor or went to a peer editing network or sat with their English teacher in office hours to help revise an essay, or had a parent who was an English professor or a great writer and got help on an essay, we would tell that student that they were resourceful, and of course they use those tools that they had at their disposal. But if a student does not have access to those things, all of a sudden that student's out of luck. And if they turned to Grammarly to help with the same thing that a tutor could help with, like, maybe you're cheating now. And those things just didn't line up for us. They weren't equitable. And they were presuming, the policy was presuming that students were only going to use AI for bad things instead of use AI for all the potential good things that are out there. It's not to say that you can't cheat like crazy with AI. Yeah, students can, and they cheated before AI. But it was restricting all of those really good uses. So we flipped the model, and all of a sudden the default became you can use AI up to a point. And the students were really sharp and realized that they were about to open Pandora's box of cheating if we didn't define this in some way. So they said, we'll just come up with levels of AI use, and we'll draw a line, and anything below this level you can always use, and anything above this level you have to have your teacher's permission. And what those students suggested in that meeting is now our policy, which I'm super proud of, and that our students led the way on that. And we're a couple years into this now, and it's going really well on campus. So
yeah, thanks for sharing.
So all that to say, like the students may use with permission model. We've moved beyond that because I don't think it's realistic. I think you can't enforce it, and it doesn't take advantage of all those potentials.
Yeah, I would agree too. And I really love that you led with student kind of inquiry into this. I think, sometimes we underestimate like their ability to like really understand the nuances of a topic. But I love that this just demonstrates that they really can approach it with the intention of equity. And it's a very, interesting take on the situation. And I think it really does help you continue to navigate, this landscape as it changes, because it really does put responsibility in students' hands rather than the policy's hands. So thank you both for sharing. And again, yeah, in the chat, again, if you always want to kind of chime in, feel free to share your thoughts, reactions, own thinking around any of these questions. Move on to the next one. So for this next one, a lot of integrity safeguards assume a clean workspace. So composing your essay in a single document, or we'll check version history to see how this has been created. But what happens to those safeguards once the writing surface itself co-writes with a student? Now, this may not exist everywhere yet, but with the direction we're going, it's possible to imagine a future where this does exist in a lot of these surfaces we use for student writing. So Micah and Kelly, pass this one off to you all.
Sure. I think that we are fortunate at Vail Mountain School that we are a small school where we have small class sizes, and our teachers truly know our students and their voice. And that's something that teachers really celebrate and want to see out of writing. And that is something that, as a student is collaborating with an AI model, or as they're working independently, if we don't see or hear their voice, then it becomes a conversation with the student of, hey, tell me more about how you got to this product for writing. And it's not meant to be punitive. It's not meant to be a gotcha at all for especially our English and our history teachers, and even some of our science labs. Sorry about that. It's meant to be, really an area where we want to hear from them. We want it to be authentic. And so that's kind of how we approach this.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, and I think it's always like, especially with student work, and just learning in general, it's always about just like the questions you ask. It always just leads to further learning about whether who the student is, or it can help them kind of uncover like, what is my process? So I love that you lead with inquiry. Micah, and I see you have your mic off, so feel free.
Thanks. I would say that the question is a really good one, because I think that kind of co-writing capability really already exists, and if not, will become even more embedded in everything that our kids are doing. So the things that we've leaned on up until now are just going to get murkier and murkier, I think, in terms of safeguards, to the point that the word safeguard, I think, is a false sense of security there. And I just think we have to think about how we teach writing differently. We just cannot teach writing the same way that we've always taught writing, right? We cannot have the first time that we as teachers lay eyes on something after the deadline, when the final draft comes in. We've told our teachers, I'm sorry, you cannot assign an essay for homework for them to take home and do at home, unless you're okay with them using AI for all of it. Because there is just not a guaranteed way to make that a clean workspace, unless you are in a secure kind of lockdown assessment environment in class. And that's not to say that there are not times where we need kids to write without any assistance, right? Where we need to know what's on their brain, and the only thing in between their brain and us is a pen and a piece of paper, or a secure computer screen, and that's fine. Do that in a secure assessment environment in class. But otherwise, I think we need to teach writing differently. And this is coming from somebody with a journalism degree. So like writing is something that I really value, and I don't think that writing ought to go away. I think we ought to teach kids how to write. We just can't do it the way we've done it before. We have to do it in a workshop environment where the teacher puts eyes on that work multiple times before the final product comes in. And like Kelly said, it's about integration of voice and individuality in all of the writing. And that happens in a workshop situation, and it happens when things change and writers get feedback on what they're doing. And that's that probably should have always been the way that we have taught writing, and it just hasn't been, because we've just assumed like, oh, we'll give you this assignment, you'll go home, you'll write it, you'll turn it in, and then I'll tear it apart later on the grades. I don't know, that's not really an effective way to teach most kids, right? If you can write really well, you're going to go home and write really well on your own. If you can't write really well, you're going to struggle at home. So let's switch how we do that, and work with kids in a workshop environment, which then takes a lot of these things out of the equation because we're working with them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really like what you said about this workshop environment. It makes me think of, tipping the balance towards more formative work versus summative work in our classrooms, especially as these kind of AI tools evolve. Because to Kelly's point, it's going to help us know our students as we see them grow and as we see these practices evolve. It's not about the product, it's about the production of our thoughts. So yeah, love both of those. Moving on to our next question. I actually really just want to highlight, Walter, thank you also for chiming in there. Yeah, it's, the methodology affects how something is produced. So thank you. For our next question. So when a school approves a platform, whether it's Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, et cetera, does that approval extend to every AI feature that the vendor later embeds into it? And I think this is especially relevant with the pace that most tech companies tend to move, as the product is updated, once or twice a month even. So the question is, how should an approved tools list handle features that arrive after the policy is written? Or is that question even in itself a little bit flawed with the assumption of an approved tools list? So, Micah?
This is a tricky one, especially we are a K-12 school, and so we have students who are under 13 and we have students that are over 13. And so when we think about approved tools, from my perspective, I'm thinking about not only what tools do I want students to have access to so that they can enhance learning, but I'm also thinking about privacy policies. I would say for our AI, our approved tools list doesn't revolve as much around the same approval for privacy policy, even though we think very carefully about that. We want to be very mindful that we're not falling into the 2010 app craze of there's an AI tool for this and there's an AI tool for that. How can we use, we're a Google school, so we use Gemini a lot, and how can we leverage Gemini and know that within the Google domain, our information is kept within our vaults, which definitely really helps. Thinking about what other AI tools are built more for schools that have kind of those safeguards up, and then really having those conversations with kids and with teachers about how it's not just that one tool that you're looking at. You have to look at those third-party vendors and find out who they are and what their privacy policies are. And it is changing rapidly. And we do have, teachers and students, we'll call it the Wild West, that are using anything and everything when they go home. And it's challenging because we cannot control, I tell this to my children all the time, the only person's actions you can control are your own. And so we we try and deliver that education as much as possible. With our 9th grade, we have digital ethics, and Micah was speaking about his student committee, and we have one at our school. And I would echo what you said, Micah. If you do not have a student committee, please reach out to one of the two of us, because it is the best thing we did as a school, giving them voice. And my students actually teach those digital ethics classes about AI, and we talk about which tools we support and why. So that's kind of how our school handles it.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, and I think I'm happy to hear that you're seconding kind of the student committee point here. I used to teach as well, and would always kind of lean on students to tell me when something's not working and when they have a vision for where they'd like to go, because at the end of the day, our goal as educators is to serve them. And it's going to help that more proactive approach rather than reactivity. So thank you. Yeah. And Micah?
Yep. I think the same as Kelly. We're very concerned about privacy with all of our ed tech tools, and especially with AI. So we look at those things a lot. And then every time a new feature or capability comes out, we're a Google school as well. So anytime something new comes out with Gemini or a Google powered AI tool, our technology staff and I have a conversation about, okay, what does this do? How does this fit? Do we want to greenlight this, or do we not greenlight it? Do we greenlight it for faculty, but not for students, or for everybody? So we have those really regular conversations. It's fluid and rapidly evolving. So we have rapidly evolving conversations about it. And as Kelly said, at the same time, just because we're really cautious about privacy and what tools we allow on student devices and on our network, and we're continually having these conversations, does not mean that all of our kids are having those exact same thoughts, and they're not just going home and using whatever tool is easiest for them. So then it becomes more about, I think, teaching kids about all of this, right? Teaching kids about why we're concerned about privacy, and teaching kids about what they should put into an LLM and what they should not, and teaching kids about what they should be doing with the tool and what they should not be doing with the tool, and what red flags to watch out for, and which tools to trust and which tools to be questioning about. So that kids are then having those thoughts and those conversations when they're on their own, because we can only protect them on our school network for so long, and then they're out there in the Wild West. So we need to give them tools so that they can navigate that world on their own. And then part of that is just us as teachers showing kids how to use the tools that we have really effectively, right? And kids have told me that when a teacher walks them through how the teacher would prompt a tool, or how the teacher would use AI for something, that gives them ideas, and they are much more likely to then mirror that and eventually walk away from the teacher having to hold their hand, and the kids will just do it on their own. Case in point, I look through our Flint history a decent amount, and the number of our kids, we have a huge number of kids who use Flint as if they were using ChatGPT. And it's because the teacher showed them how to do it at some point, and they found value in the response. They thought the response was helpful. So now those kids are going to Flint to use it to ask any questions, instead of just like a ubiquitous ChatGPT, which is not locked out if they're using a free account.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear that your students have kind of like begun finding the value in Flint as just like a general LLM. And I agree too. It's like, we control the controllables. At some point, our students will leave our schools. And so setting them up to be kind of just stewards of their own kind of education and like privacy, I think is just the most important thing we can do here. Thank you both for that. So our next question asks, is there still such a thing as a meaningfully no AI assignment when AI is built into toolbars and all these other features? And we're asking if the bottom rung, which is the no AI floor for our policies, no longer holds, how should we redesign assessment around that? Kelly, Micah.
I do think there's still a time and a place where we want students to do work without AI. There are skills that we want students to build before they end up using the tool. AI is a tool. If students do not have the skill to be able to write, you know, a strong prompt, the AI is then rendered useless. We want them to be able to think critically. We want them to be able to question. We want them to be able to problem solve. And so we need to provide time and space for them to gain these skills. And then once they've mastered the skills that we're asking them to do, then we can bring in tools that will then enhance and level up, you know, and I think that takes place definitely in our younger grades at our school for sure. And then as they get into upper school, and really even, you know, we open up Gemini for students in 8th grade. So that's when we start talking about, okay, what are the skills that we're assessing here that we really want to know that students know how to do? And then what are the skills that we want students to be able to use tools for to enhance their abilities to, you know, create, produce, problem solve.
Yeah, thank you. Micah?
I mentioned this before, but there are absolutely times where where students need to do work without AI. There are times where we have to know what's on that student's mind, and there needs to be no filter at all in between there. And we just have to manage how that happens. That can't happen at home anymore. So we cannot send an assignment home and say, sorry, class, no AI on this one. Do it without, please, because we just have no way to effectively monitor or support that. So that sort of work shifts to an in-class assessment, right? We use Canvas and Respondus Lockdown Browser for secure testing. So whatever you're using, right, some version of that, or no computers at all, and pen and paper. And I don't think that just going back to the Blue Book days is the solution to AI. Because I think that there are so many other ways for kids to demonstrate understanding than writing, but there are absolutely times where kids need to demonstrate something without AI, and we need to monitor that. And we need to think about what that is. One quick anecdote is that early in conversations with faculty, someone said, "Look, I really don't want students to lose the ability to sit across the table from one another and have a thoughtful conversation because of AI." I 100% agree with that. And there's so much potential with AI, and a massive pitfall is that it can really short circuit critical thinking and communication skills if we don't use it the right way. But I think that I think Kelly mentioned this, like, what are we really trying to teach, right? And if teaching kids how to sit across the table from one another and have a thoughtful conversation is something we want them to be able to do, then we ought to sit them across the table from one another and help them have thoughtful conversations, instead of just assume that because they've written a beautiful five paragraph essay, they will then therefore be able to have a thoughtful conversation about it. Sometimes those things happen together and sometimes they don't. So it's just rethinking how kids are demonstrating understanding and giving them different opportunities to show us what they know and what they think and how that process is working, and not just the final product, but how they got to that final product and what questions they had along the way and all that sort of stuff. And all those things can and sometimes should happen without AI. We just have to change how we do that.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you, just around the thought of, like, you know, it's the problem solving we're setting students up. It's that critical thinking we're setting them up for. And like, I think Kelly, you mentioned, you know, it takes time and space. I think sometimes the allure of AI can bring us into the space where it's required at all times. But I think best use of ed tech is when it's, you know, a back and forth between students kind of being themselves with each other in the classroom, and then leaning on the tools in certain moments, and figuring out what those moments are that are going to best serve students for developing these skills. Move on to the next one. And this question asks, as it gets harder to prove a piece of work was made, does the whole conversation have to shift from catching misuse to building trust? And what does it take to create a culture where students disclose how they use AI because they see the value in it, not because they're afraid of getting caught?
Yeah, I know I spoke to this earlier, but as we talk with students about the work that they've done, coming at it with, you know, from that place of curiosity, hey, tell me how this was built. Our AI policy in there, we have the word trust, built on trust. as verbiage. We're a rapport-driven school, which I know, most schools really, that's the goal, is relationships with kids, relationships with teachers, and that's where it has to start. That your students know that you come from a place of caring, concern, wanting to really help them achieve and do their best. And so talking with them again of, hey, I've seen a lot of your work now. This looks very different. Tell me about how you arrived at this piece. Micah, you mentioned the way we're doing assignments now needs to shift and change in terms of we're writing little snippets in class. We're producing little pieces in class. We're having these discussions in class. It's less at home because that's where we know and we can kind of see really what is the student doing on their own, what is the student using a tool for. And so as we have those small assignments happen in class, we're able to see what the students are doing. We can then say, yeah, this looks exactly like work you've created in the past, or this looks a little different. And then, when you're in class and allowing students to use AI tools really brings down that wall of AI being taboo or we're not supposed to use it in this class. Our history teacher started to dive right in really early on and was letting our students use AI tools as tertiary sources of, hey, we're going to study this topic. I want you to know it a little bit better. Use the LLM to find out more about it and to gain that kind of background knowledge before we even begin. And so that's where students can see, okay, my teacher doesn't think AI is the worst thing ever. Wow, she's encouraging us to use it. Therefore, I can talk with her about my use of it and not feel like I'm going to get punished. So I think those are two big pieces for us as we think about using this.
Yeah, I really resonate with adults kind of, and I think this came up in one of our other questions leading, kind of like it's modeling for students. And this might not be in the AI policy itself, but as a, part of the school, just, how we demonstrate openness to students and foster that kind of trust that builds a community of care. So I really like that you guys are leaning into that there. Thank you. And Micah?
We in our guidelines, we have a really specific point that says concerns about student AI use should maintain a start a conversation approach, which is what Kelly was just talking about, and that we really believe that you have to. There's so much gray area here that it has to be a conversation with kids about how they arrived somewhere, right? And if we're moving writing to a workshop environment, then we, the teachers, will have seen that work a lot of times. Then we can have a conversation that says, look, hey, I saw this draft yesterday and you had one really rough paragraph that we were going to improve and you turned it in today. And now there are 5 really well polished paragraphs. Walk me through what happened last night. How did we get to this point? And just having students asking students to be transparent about their AI use really helps, and to not flag that as, well, okay, well, now you have to go to the dean's office because you told me that you use AI, but that we just talk through that process. Something that we as, I don't know what it is, but something that we as teachers did a long time ago, or maybe society made AI seem so taboo to kids right away. And we've got some work to undo that a little bit so that it's not just, oh, you used AI, you're in trouble, but how did you use AI, right? And walk me through it. And okay, maybe you went too far at this point with AI, and here's why. We use a Chrome extension called Revision History, which is worth looking into, particularly if you're a Google school. It's not an AI tool. It's maybe AI adjacent, but it will allow you. It takes advantage of Google Docs revision history, and it will allow you to watch what happens when a student writes. You can play it back like a time-lapse video, and it'll give you a summary of like how many minutes they spent actively writing, how many blocks of copy and paste are in there. So, if, again, I keep using 5-paragraph essay as an example, even though I think that should go away as a thing, but 5-paragraph essay, right? It's 500 words, and the student spent 2.5 minutes active writing time. Like, I'd like to know what happened there, right? Or you're playing back and you see a student kind of struggling through an introductory paragraph, and then all of a sudden, boom, 2 really well polished paragraphs drop into that Google Doc. That's a conversation that you can play it back for the student, say, almost like a coach watching game film, like play it back. Tell me what happens right here. And then it's a conversation about what happened there. And hopefully at that point, the student knows that there's been a process and that it's not a surprise, but it's just a way to watch what's happening. And students have said that they know that if teachers are doing that they know teachers are familiar with the writing process, they're watching things like revision history, they're familiar with their drafts, then they are far less likely to use AI more than they should, because they know that teachers are watching.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about just like this whole thing is around like having a conversation. That's a tool you're using to have this conversation with students. And as they learn, whatever I do, it's going to open a conversation. I think it helps them just understand like what the point of transparency is. As they get older, where it's like, the point of having a conversation around something, the point of sharing something is to just let somebody in on your process. And that can only lead to good things. So we'd just, second that approach there as well. Our 6th question here. This one we've already kind of talked about a little bit. So maybe we can spend a little less time on it just to be mindful of time. But we talked a lot about equity, and especially at the beginning, where we said it cuts both ways. Unreliable detection can wrongly accuse, multilingual, neurodivergent students who have different needs, while always honest assistance can widen gaps or close them. And beyond deciding what's allowed, how should fairness and equity actively shape an AI policy?
Yeah, I think that, Mikey, you mentioned we have students at school who go home and meet with a tutor and have a tutor, really polish a writing assignment. They turn that in, or, they're sitting at the table with mom and dad, and mom and dad may say, oh, hey, let me look at that for a minute. I'm gonna, I think this sounds better. You would totally say this. And so I think that as we look at AI, we also need to think about those pieces of what students have access to as well. And we want to make sure that, those kids who parents may be able to afford a tutor, that we're giving other students that access, while also thinking about, okay, we're here to teach students to think, to problem solve, to collaborate, and those are all tough skills. And so we want the struggle to happen in a productive way. So thinking about just widening that conversation of, it's not just AI that we're talking about what's allowed, what's not allowed, but we're talking about what's allowed with a tutor, what's allowed with mom and dad, what's allowed, in all of these spaces, so that we can really get to, that deep learning, that deep understanding. And so that helps when we think about equity and fairness.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, and it's something I've thought about. When I used to teach, I taught math, and some students had tutors who, they would verbalize and say, "Oh, okay, I'll get some help at home with this," and others wouldn't have that. But AI opens the door to those students that didn't have it to have someone at home. And I think, while AI does have this like kind of broader reach than maybe your parent does, because AI can have expertise in any subject. I think it is worth considering like what it does for the students that don't have it, more than considering what it does for students that maybe will use it in whatever they see fit. And yeah, Micah, if you have thoughts as well on this one.
I mean, I mentioned this with context for how we got to our policy, right? And equitable access to academic resources or education resources was one of our main, one of the main things we looked at, was that we wanted to make sure that that all students had access to good resources, not just students with means. So that 100% it continues to be part of our focus and things that we want to make sure that we're staying on top of. The other quick thing I'll mention is that we had our eye on that, and what we've seen over the last couple of years is the potential for another gap to start forming that we hadn't really thought about at first, and that's that students who AI use is natural, and for students who are really digging into it, we are seeing those kids take off at exponential levels. They are doing such amazing things with the assistance of AI and asking such great questions and developing such great products and learning about such complicated things that we don't even know about. And they're just taking off. And students for whom AI use is not natural, or they're writing lousy prompts and they're not asking the right questions, they're kind of cruising along here at a little bit of a plateau. So that lends itself to AI literacy, right? And teaching everybody about the power of AI and how to prompt effectively and what resources to use and which to avoid, because otherwise the kids who are taking off this way and the kids who are staying this way, there's a new gap that's going to form there if we're not really careful about watching that.
Yeah, Micah, I love that. And it just kind of, we talk a lot about how we now have an opportunity for reteaching how to research and those skills. I feel like we are not always the best at teaching kids how to access information. We say, go to Google, and they just read like the little snippets of, that AI literacy and that research skill, working with our English, history, science departments of, how do we really capitalize on that so that students can see, okay, here's how I access even more. I love that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think, it's like, what space are we making to teach these secondary education skills where it's maybe not content, specific, but it's around, executive functioning. Can you kind of direct your own learning? And I think it's an interesting point that AI is kind of exposing that gap a little bit. To be mindful of time, let's leave this last question here on the screen. And we'll be posting these slides as well. And we do have kind of a community page for Flint. So if you have kind of thoughts and questions, or if you're looking for more support, please feel free to kind of go there. I'll share a link to that at the end in our chat. We also have an AI policy page on Flint. It contains information about some of our partner schools' AI policies, where they're sourcing information from. So if you are looking for kind of resources to help you kind of begin revising or making additions to your current policy, we'll have those in the chat in a moment. But I just want to open the floor to anybody who has any questions. But first, Micah and Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today. Your insights were really valuable. I loved hearing what you both are doing at your schools, particularly what your students are doing. It's always warming to hear like how passionate they are about their own learning. And again, I love that you both have student groups, where their voices are really being heard. So again, thank you so much. And I'll stay on for kind of these last 6 minutes here. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask, whether it's about AI policy, whether it's about Flint itself. Happy to be a resource for that. But if you are, feeling good and you're like, all right, time to go put pen to paper for these AI policies, feel free to go on ahead and have your Wednesday.
Tom, we use Grammarly authorship. And Micah, when you were talking about your Google extension, I'm excited to try and see how that is similar and different. We love authorship in some ways, that being able to see in real time of, oh, you wrote 5 paragraphs in 30 seconds. Tell me more about that. But it is also challenging that there are times where if you type in something that you may have gotten from AI, it will say it's human generated, even though it might be AI generated. So it's, again, like all of these tools, not 100% accurate, but I definitely have really liked it. Our English and history departments are using it, and it's been really positive. Then I will address the AI for cheating. Again, one of the really cool things we've done with our AI committee is we've partnered with our Honor Council, which is also student run with a faculty member facilitating, to try and talk through policy. And so that really helps because our Honor Council knows more of the ins and outs of students who've been brought to Honor Council for using AI to cheat. And so that's helpful to help us improve our verbiage. And there's no magic button as far as this goes. Again, it's a conversation with students of how did you get from A to B? And sometimes we bring parents in. Sometimes we really talk about how this is an example of your work, and this doesn't look like your work at all. Tell us more about how you got here. If it does come out that students are using AI and are cheating, they have to redo the assignment, and often for only a portion of the credit. They may not be able to earn above, let's say, a 55%. So that's how we've addressed that.
I can jump in on the question about, sorry, we're getting our summer school day started here, so I had to pop out for a second. But how do we deal with students using AI to cheat? So I really am proud of our academic integrity policy, regardless of AI, and that essentially we talk about a trust that has to exist between student and teacher. And when a student puts his or her name on the top of an assignment and turns it in, the teacher has to trust that the student did the work within the realm of how they asked them to do it, right? That they've met their expectations and they did not go about doing that assignment in a way that really goes away or moves away from how the teacher intended them to do it. So our AI level policy has helped with that. That if a teacher has publicized this is a level 2 assignment, and what comes in is clearly level 3, meaning fully AI generated, and that wasn't the expectation, then the student violated that trust, and therefore it was academically dishonest with that work. And that makes those conversations easier. I mean, a cheating conversation is never easy, but it's more clear cut that either you did this within level 1, level 2, or you didn't, and level 3 wasn't allowed, and this is clearly level 3. That just makes it pretty obvious what was happening there, and it makes that conversation easier. And the teacher being really familiar with that work coming up to there helps with that and helps avoid that, because then those conversations happen as early interventions instead of at the end when it's too late and then the student has clearly gone too far and it is in trouble. The other quick thing I'll mention about cheating, because we just had a conversation about this, is that our cheating numbers at school are just about where they were before AI, after AI, even this far into AI. So it's not as if AI has created a new cheating rampage. Now, to be clear, there's an academic dishonesty epidemic across the country, which is really well documented, that lots and lots and lots of kids take academic advantages. And that is still true. And there are lots of reasons for that. But AI has not dumped gasoline on that fire. It's really pretty consistent. And if anything, the things we're seeing in our dean's office more and more are old-fashioned forms of cheating. So cheat sheets and answers written on the back of calculator sleeves and things like that, rather than just I've used AI too much.
Yeah, thank you for both for that. I used to teach math, and so I would every once in a while find a calculator that has a little bit of extra text on it. But I think it's also interesting, a all behavior is communication. And I think a lot of times it's just treating that conversation around, what do you need? Clearly there's something where, we can kind of help you get to a level where, you don't feel the need to cheat. AI can be a part of it, doesn't have to be. But I think those are both really thoughtful approaches to that question. So thank you. And yeah, we're at 11 here, so we're at the top of the hour. So I'm gonna let everybody go. But again, like Kelly, thank you so much one more time for this. We really value your voices here at Flint and I think just broadly in the Get Education space. And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to support@flintkk12.com via email, or you can also email me at teddy@flintkk12.com. Always happy to answer questions or kind of put people in contact and continue the conversation around this. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your day, y'all.
Thanks, Teddy.
Thank you, Teddy.
Thank you.
Take care, y'all.